you remember when you were going through a timeline, and I think it was from 2019 to 2020, different events that had occurred?
I do.
Okay. And we heard a lot of names. Tanquarius Mender, right?
Correct.
And you said he's a member of the Rolling Crips.
As well as YSL, yes.
Okay, and we heard about Stephen Harris.
Correct.
And he's a Crip. And we heard about...
No, I'm sorry, Stephen Harris is a member of YSL.
Okay, he's a member of YSL. We heard about Marcus Sims.
Correct.
He's a Crip.
Yes.
Okay, we heard about Wayne Alford. And we heard about a bunch of other names in this timeline
Correct.
that you were going through. Well, first of all, let me just ask you this. When you were asked about all these events, you were referring to some sort of, you were refreshing your recollection with a sheet that was in front of you.
Correct.
Okay, that was highlighted, color-coded.
Correct.
Okay, did you create that sheet?
Mr. Abadi had created the sheet as a timeline.
Okay, so when you were testifying about those events, you were refreshing your recollection. You were being asked questions by the prosecutors, correct?
Correct.
And then you didn't have any reports of your own with you, did you, about any of these events?
No, I didn't. I was at the GBI at that time, and there were APD cases, so they wouldn't be my reports.
So you didn't investigate any of these events?
So the way it would work is gangs typically doesn't take an aggravated assault or a homicide or things of that nature. We will work with those units and provide them information and assist with their investigations. So the reports, I will help with the cases, but they would fall with those investigators.
Did you have any reports with you when you were of your reports with you when you were discussing those?
No.
Okay. But you were refreshing your recollection off of a sheet of paper that was prepared by the prosecutor.
Well, this is something we had discussed. There's numerous incidents, so we needed a timeline to keep them correct.
All right, well, let me just ask you this. In all those things, 2019, 2020, that you discussed, all those events, Shannon Stillwell wasn't charged with any of those events, was he?
He was not.
Okay, cool. Remember when you talked about how I was asking you about your reports and you said you write them in search warrant applications?
Correct.
All right, I want to talk to you about that. You did a search warrant application for the house of Jeffrey Williams on 355 Allison Drive, correct?
Correct.
All right. Not moving any evidence. I'm going to ask you some questions about that affidavit. Would having your affidavit that you wrote
Sure.
up there with you, would that be helpful?
Sure.
May I approach?
You may.
Okay. These affidavits that you fill out to take to a judge to try to get a search warrant, they're under oath?
Yes.
Okay. A judge relies on them, relies on the accuracy of them, correct?
Correct.
Relies on them to be complete.
Correct.
The intent of an affidavit is not to mislead a judge, is it?
No,
Okay. And you wouldn't mislead a judge, would you?
I would not.
Okay. And you filled out this affidavit on May 9th, 2022, correct?
Following the presentation to the grand jury, yes.
Right. May 9th, 2022?
Correct.
Yeah. And that was also in the wake of these various attacks on Lucci, on Rashawn Bennett in the jail.
Correct.
Okay. In fact, you were interested. You had that one with Jada Myrick. With Mr. Eppinger and Mr. Sumlin, and Mr. Eppinger was trying to get Mr. Sumlin to talk to someone to get payment, right? And you suspected that person to be Jeffrey Williams.
Suspected, and that was confirmed by Mr. Sumlin.
Okay, so you suspected that to be Jeffrey Williams.
Right, and was confirmed by Mr. Sumlin, yes.
Okay. Again.
Yes, I
please,
suspected,
just
yes.
Questions I ask, okay? So you saw a search warrant for Jeffrey Williams' home for evidence on these matters, correct?
No,
Okay. You saw the search warrant for Jeffrey Williams' home.
for his body, for his cellular devices, and for gang evidence.
Okay. Okay. So, in Mr. Williams' home.
Correct.
In your affidavit is what's used to develop PC, or probable cause, for the judge to rely on, right?
Correct.
And in your affidavit, I think it's in the 4th page, you reference a post that you saw on the internet about Jeffrey Williams posting, YFN, and this is already in evidence, YFN, if ain't like what you do for your mother and kids, I would have been killed you, right?
Correct.
That's referenced in your affidavit.
Which page is not on 4?
Well, mine's not numbered, but I'm just going to go by. The second full paragraph. So there's one sentence and then 2 paragraphs down.
Okay, that's different than what I have.
You post that Mr. Williams supposed to make, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that made your affidavit because you thought that was important to show Mr. Williams and his veiled threats to Mr. Bennett, correct?
Correct.
Okay, cool. Can I have that back? I'm just going to need that.
Sure.
I'll bring it back to you. Now, you also, 2 pages after that, whatever page you have it, I have in the beginning it says details 4.
I'm going to have to see the page because these pages are, whatever I have is not the same as yours.
Also in your affidavit, you include a text thread between Mr. Wooney Lee and Mr. Williams, correct?
Correct.
And as part of this text thread, you draw the judge's attention to a specific line, correct?
I included that amongst other things in the affidavit, yes.
Well, there's one particular line that you put in a bigger font, and you also circled it, or it's circled, correct?
It's circled, yes.
Okay. And you circled it to draw attention to it, correct?
To what I was referring to, yes.
Yes. And the line that you circled to draw attention to was YSL rule the world, kid, 24M on an N head, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you wanted to highlight that passage said by Mr. Williams in the text thread, correct?
Correct.
You wanted to highlight that for the judge.
Amongst other posts, yes.
Okay. What was he referring to? Why did you feel it important to highlight 24M on an N's head to the judge?
Well, he's referring to YSL ruling the world
Yeah.
as an organization, and it could be a play on words or a play on things that have happened, saying 24M on a racial expletive head.
Okay, 24M on a racial expletive head. It sounds like Mr. Williams had money on someone's head.
It could be taken that way, yes.
It could be taken that way, and you highlighted it and circled it for the judge, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you believed that too. You wouldn't have misled the judge about what was being discussed, would you? You believed that to be a threat, didn't you?
I didn't say it was a threat. It's saying that he's willing to, that's how they talk. They'll talk about, they have the ability to put money on people's heads.
Okay. Mr. Kokomo, could you please publish Jeffrey Williams 3 and 4? Is that correct? This thread that you highlighted in your affidavit to the judge, this thread between Wooney Lee and Mr. Williams took place on February 7th, 2021?
Correct.
Okay.
They can put 24M on the front of their head. Y'all young hoes get in line. Slime rule the world. Believe it. Y'all niggas out this motherfucker spending 24 million on their heads. They can put 24M on the front of their head. Y'all young hoes get in line.
Okay. Please publish Jeffrey Williams 3A. What's displayed is Jeffrey Williams 3A.
I do.
Okay. And it's a reaction. Jeffrey Williams reacting after Lil Uzi Vert put a $24 million diamond into his head.
Correct.
Okay. Did you know about Lil Uzi Vert and the $24 million diamond and that reference when you filled out this affidavit?
I did not, but I would still stand by what I put in the affidavit.
Okay, so you're telling me right now, on a sworn statement to a judge with knowledge, that Lil Uzi Vert just got a $24 million diamond put into his head the days before Mr. Williams typed that, you would still put that quote, YSL ruled the world, 24 million on an N head in that affidavit?
Objection. They compounded made a mischaracterization of what the witness just said. Overruled.
I did not have knowledge of Lil Uzi Vert getting a diamond in his head.
Okay, so all right, so let me ask that last question again. Instead of saying I would do it again, if you had knowledge that Lil Uzi Vert just got $24 million diamond in his head and that Mr. Williams was referring to that, would you still have put that in the affidavit?
Yes.
To mislead the judge?
Not misleading. May I explain?
Yes.
Okay. What I'm saying is this social media direct message is different than what you see on here. Lil Uzi Vert, I don't remember, is a member of YSL, so I think it might be a new, like a term they're going to coin. Like wipe his nose, things of that nature. So 24 on somebody's head might be a new thing that they're going to go with. He's saying YSL rules the world. As the leader, he can make that assertion.
You're doing a lot of explaining. Did you do any of that explaining in your sworn affidavit to the judge?
The sworn affidavit reads, Jeffrey Williams brags that YSL rules the world and has $24 million.
Okay. And clearly, when you put highlighted and circled 24M on a N's head, you're sending a message to that judge, are you not? Let's be real.
I'm referring to my words that I wrote say, Jeffrey Williams brags that YSL rules the world and has $24 million.
All right, and just so we're clear, as we sit here today, as someone, a law enforcement officer, even with knowledge of this, you would still put that in front of the judge?
There are different interpretations to everything as we've seen throughout this whole trial.
Yeah, I agree. Can we make our determinations, or are you going to make the determinations for us?
Objection. Arguments is sustained.
Do you think maybe you misinterpreted what was said by Mr. Williams? Is that a possibility?
I think it differs from what was presented on the internet and between direct messages, as we've seen.
So your answer is no, your interpretation is perfect, pristine.
My interpretation was YSL rules the world and they have $24 million. That's what I wrote in my words in the affidavit. I didn't say Mr. Williams has $24 million on YF and Lucci's head. I didn't say that. I said YSL rules. He claims that YSL rules the world and has $24 million.
Now, you didn't say it. You just put in a bigger font and circled it for the judge, right? Right?
It wasn't a bigger font. That's how the message reads. It's the same font as the date and time, the same size as the date and time as the name, the Instagram handle.
In the circle?
It's circled, correct.
Let's talk about you, Ms. Knight. Could you pull up 227 VV? Mr. Nichols
Correct.
rolling a blunt.
Correct.
Okay. And then there's other individuals there, correct? Correct? There's other individuals in the room?
Correct.
Okay. And then it's on Mr. Stillwell's phone, so you're presuming that Mr. Stillwell was filming the video?
It was filmed from his device. So
Right,
yes.
right, right. Okay. So yesterday, you made a claim that a gun, well, what did you say? A gun is, I don't want to jumble your words. What are you claiming about the guns on this table?
A gun is what?
You identified or thought a gun was consistent with something?
It could be consistent with a Glock 27.
Could be consistent.
Correct.
Okay. And which gun is this?
The one towards the back right here.
Okay. Could be consistent with a Glock 27. All right. It could also, well, first of all, are you a firearms expert?
I'm not.
Okay. You're just someone who's owned a Glock before.
Several, yes.
Okay. And before yesterday, had you ever made the claim that, oh, I reviewed this video and this appears to be a Glock 27?
That was my first time testifying yesterday, so where else would I make?
What about reports? Did you ever write a report and said, I reviewed this is very important. I reviewed this video that was in Mr. Stillwell's phone, and I believe that that could be consistent with a Glock 27.
Well, while reviewing the evidence in preparation for trial, when I took a better look at this video and found it, it was probably 2 or 3 days before I testified, and that's when I first had to really research through and look at photos and kind of isolate what kind of gun that was.
So the answer is no, you didn't write a report.
No.
Okay. And certainly the first time saying it to me or anyone on this side was yesterday in court.
Correct.
Okay. You say it looks like it could be consistent, or it could be consistent with a Glock 27 based on the shape of the bottom of the grip. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. It could also be consistent with a Springfield firearm, correct?
I'm not familiar with a Springfield, but from how the magazine looks, also it could be consistent with a Glock.
Okay. It could also be consistent with a Sig Sauer. Could also be consistent with a Smith & Wesson, correct?
I'm familiar with a Glock.
Right, because you're not a firearms expert.
I
You're
never-
only familiar with these Glocks.
I never claimed to be, Mr. Schardt.
Okay, well, you start identifying guns in court, kind of making yourself an expert. But you're not an expert, are you?
I'm not.
Okay. And you don't even know, whatever this gun is, if Mr. Stillwell left with that gun or didn't leave with that gun. You don't know if anyone left with that gun. You don't know whose gun that is.
Correct, but we don't know that they didn't.
Okay. Right. Let me ask you this about your Glock 27 that you say this looks consistent with. When you shoot your Glock 27, does it expel shell casings?
I don't own a Glock 27. When I was purchasing a subcompact Glock, I was going back and forth between the 27 and the 43. I prefer to shoot a 9mm, so I went with the 43.
So you don't even own a Glock 27?
I just said when I was researching the two, handling the two at the gun dealer.
So now you don't own a Glock 27. You were researching it, which means you were handling the gun at the gun dealer. That's your experience with the Glock 27.
I never asserted that I owned one. I've seen one. I've handled one. I can recognize one.
So you've handled one at a gun dealer, and that's what you're basing the identification on.
As I've recovered a good bit of guns in my
Okay.
career. I know what they look like.
All right, let me ask you this. Since you know about guns, at least through your career, Glock 27s, when you shoot them, do they expel shell casings?
Yes.
Okay, Glock 27s, when you shoot them, do they make a loud bang?
Yes.
When you shoot a Glock 27, does it create a muzzle flash?
It should. I mean, when you
Okay.
shoot it, like during the day, you wouldn't see it, or sometimes at night you can see it, but
Okay, and when you shoot a Glock 27, does it emit gunshot residue?
if it's inside of a contained area, yes, it would.
Okay. All right. Remember on Friday you talked about you get to the end of an investigation, something seemed small is huge. And we were
Correct.
talking about the post. All right. Well, there's one thing, surveillance video. You would agree that that starts huge and remains huge? Like surveillance video is a pretty important part of a case.
Every investigation is different, but yes,
Okay. You've seen the BP video, correct?
I have.
And you've seen it, Detective Hogan showed it to you?
He did, for the purpose of identifying the individuals, yes.
Right, okay. Have you seen the FedEx surveillance video?
I have.
Okay. I'd like to watch it with you. Is that okay?
Sure.
Mr. Kokomo, if you could cue it up. Investigator, when did you first see the FedEx video?
It was after I met with Investigator Hogan in the afternoon of the 16th, so it would have been after that.
Okay. Well, are you aware that, and maybe this will help you answer this question, you're aware that Detective Hogan swore out warrants against my client without ever viewing the FedEx video?
I can't speak to what he did or did not do.
Okay. When did you most recently watch the FedEx video?
Probably maybe like a week ago,
Okay. How many times in total have you watched the FedEx video?
a few times.
A few times. When you say a few times, how many is it?
And I've watched it a year ago, or a couple years, like 2 years ago.
Kokomo, if you could please publish the FedEx video. Okay, Mr. Kokomo, if you could pause that video right now. Thank you. Investigator Viverito. At this point in video, as we have it paused, you would agree that Mr. Drinks' red Versa is on the left, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You would agree that Mr. Stillwell's rented white Audi with tinted windows
Correct.
is in the middle, and you would agree that Mr. Nichols, actually Miss Lewis, Mr. Nichols' wife, that Ford Fusion is on the right, correct?
Either the right or staggered behind it, yes.
Okay. And according to your investigation, Mr. Drinks is alone in the car,
Yes.
okay? Mr. Stillwell is in the car with Mr. Garlington per your investigation.
Correct.
And Mr. In the car, the Ford Fusion, we have Mr. Nichols driving,
Correct.
Mr. Boyer,
Correct.
and Mr. Farley.
Correct.
Okay. And your theory is that while at this light, Mr. Stillwell shot Mr. Drinks, correct?
I'm not the homicide investigator, so I'm going along with the evidence that was presented to me by homicide, but yes, that's consistent with what Detective Hogan, his case.
Well, you know, he swore out a warrant for Shannon Stillwell for actually shooting Mr. Drinks.
That's consistent with what Detective Hogan had found.
Okay. In this video, you could see headlights, correct?
Correct.
You could see traffic lights,
You can see tail lights and traffic lights, yes.
and you could see brake lights, correct?
Correct.
All right, awesome. Mr. Kokomo, could you just play the video? And I'm just going to ask you to look at the cars closely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, pause, Mr. Kokomo, please. All right, so we're paused at 1:02:36 on this video. At this point, Mr. Stillwell in the white Audi is pulled off, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and Mr. Nichols and with Mr. Boyer and Mr. Farley have pulled off.
Correct.
Okay, while they were there at that light with Mr. Drinks, did you observe any muzzle flash on that video?
No, and with this quality of video, I would not expect to see it.
Okay, right. You just see brake lights and traffic lights and headlights, but no muzzle flash. Okay, I got you.
A muzzle flash is much, much, much dimmer than a brake light. Like if you're shooting at night, you're hard pressed to see your own muzzle flash.
Firearms expert again.
I'm telling you my experience from shooting a firearm. We do take night firing courses.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Gunshot residue. You aware that the headliner from Mr. Stillwell's car, the Audi, was collected and tested for gunshot residue?
I am.
You ever talked to Alexander GBI analyst Alexander Coven about the results that he found?
I have not.
Here's the stuff. Certainly before any of those GSR results were in, correct?
Correct.
Let's talk about tint. You've been preparing with the state. You know that the state has said that Mr. Stillwell had tint applied to his windows of that white Audi upon renting it, correct?
Correct.
In violation of the rental agreement, I may add.
Correct.
Okay. And this tint was applied on flat